All right, as promised, live at 1500 Eastern Standard Time. And I know that a lot of people wait for people to come on and, see that they have audiences. This is going to be able to be watched repeatedly. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because there's some things I want to read you guys from the book before we get into question and answers. My name is Joaquin Watai. I'm the author of the book PTSDog, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder and the Service Dog. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a disabled veteran. I do suffer from PTSD, and I do use a service dog to assist in the treatment of my PTSD. I went from 35 pills a day of 8 or 9 different medications to 5 psychological medications a day. Not 5 pills of 2 medications a day because I started using a service dog. I highly recommend the benefit of using a PTSD service dog. It really does help get you off the zombie cocktail that they like to prescribe for PTSD. So like I said, I'm going to read some stuff before the Q&A gets started, just to get us started, get us thinking in the right direction. What I want to talk about is the pros and cons of training resources. And what I mean by that is how you get your service dog. So I'm going to start with the pros and cons of self-training. The bottom line is the first pro. Although you do have to buy the dog, pay for dog food, equipment, and veterinary care, you're not paying a trainer and you're not paying an organization for the dog. So ultimately, the least expensive way to go about getting a PTSD service dog is to train your own dog. The next reason that I find self-training is beneficial is control. You control your dog's training. You decide how you're going to train your dog, if you're going to use positive reinforcement, if you want to use a pinch collar, a choke collar, an e-collar. You decide what the methods are that you're going to use to train your dog. You're able to customize your training to your dog and to your needs. Nobody else makes those calls, you do. That's a big deal, especially for a PTSD service dog. The process. One of the things we'll discuss, I'm sure, in the Q&A is the importance of the process of training your PTSD service dog. I am very firmly convinced that the process of training your dog is integral to your personal growth and healing. Training your dog yourself forces you to do a lot of soul searching. You have to find out what your stressors are, and you decide how your dog can respond to those stressors in order to prevent them from becoming triggers. You have to learn the ins and outs of your dog as well. You learn how to pick up on your dog's responses to your PTSD, and you can build off of their natural responses directly, shaping those responses into tasks that specifically serve your needs. The next pro of self-training is the connection. The bond that you form with your dog is the basis upon which a PTSD service dog creates a successful team. I cannot emphasize that enough. That soul-to-soul bond, for lack of a better description, between you and your service dog is how the PTSD service dog works. My friend Travis Stickvet Landchild posits that the PTSD service dog is the only treatment for PTSD that actually treats the veteran, not his symptoms. And I couldn't agree more. That connection you make with your dog, that you build with your animal, is absolutely vital to the success of a dog handler team. It's taken me from not being able to make it more than 15 feet into a grocery store before running out and hiding in the truck to being able to tolerate an hour-long Christmas shopping trip in Walmart. I can't describe how different my life has become through the use of my PTSD service dog. It makes a big difference. Now, there are some cons to self-training your service dog, and I'm going to talk about those, just to be fair. First of all, washout. Washout is a big deal. If you don't know what you're doing, if you're not sure how to train a dog, you could find yourself way in over your head and failing. Your confidence, knowledge, and determination are absolutely vital to training service dogs successfully. That doesn't mean you have to go to college and get a dog training degree or anything like that. Anybody has the right per the law to train their own service dog, but you have to be real careful about the dog you choose and how you train that dog in order for it to become a successful dog as part of a working team. And remember that a service dog handler and their dog are a working team, and that's important. That teamwork is very important. The next con to self-training is perception. Unfortunately, although it's perfectly legal to train your own service dog, and there are many, many successful self-trained teams, there are a lot of people who think that owner-trained dogs are fake. This perception is perpetuated by the fake service dog problem. And although it is a prevalent perception, it's completely incorrect. There are blog groups and Facebook pages dedicated to doing nothing but attacking owner trainers. That's sad, but it's out there. And that's a con to self-training. If you can't handle the ignorant abuse, maybe it's not for you. Next is cooperative training. It's the second method of getting a service dog, for lack of a better term. Cooperative training is where you work with a trainer, but you are personally and directly responsible for the day-to-day upkeep and training of your dog. The first pro for doing this is resources. Working together with a trainer to train your service dog gives you access to the trainer's experience and often the experience of the trainer's peers. Many trainers bring issues to their peers to discuss and help find resolutions for. So you're not just working with one other person's ability to train a dog, but if there's a particular issue that your dog just can't get over, they call their peers and talk to their peers, and that's pretty cool because you end up getting the resources of maybe 10 to 15 different views and opinions and experience of training excuse me, in order to address something you may be working through with your dog. So that's a big plus as far as cooperative training. Another is education. The cool thing about cooperatively training your service dog is you realize real fast when you're working with a trainer that your dog's not being trained. You are. A good trainer is actually teaching you how to work with and train your dog. You go to the class, the trainer says, this is what we want to get your dog to do. And they then teach you how to get the dog to do it. What they're really doing is teaching you how to train the dog. So when you walk away from a cooperative experience, you walk away with a lot of tools in your toolbox in order to train another dog in the future. And that's cool. That's really cool. In fact, I know a lot of people who did a cooperative training program and were actually decided, hey, I want to do this, and ended up working with their trainer and continuing to help train other service dogs. And made it a career. That's fantastic. That's a great way to go about it. It gives you some great skills. The bottom line is another pro for cooperative training. It's a lot cheaper to work with a trainer than buying a fully trained service dog from an organization. A lot less expensive. You're looking at, depending on where you go and who you use, maybe $120 per session, maybe $120 per 6 sessions. It just depends on who they are and what they're doing, rather than tens of thousands of dollars with an organization. It's way less expensive. In cooperative training, you still have direct input into the dog's training. If the trainer uses methods or devices you do not agree with, you have the ability to discuss with that trainer, and you could even fire them and find a different trainer because you're the paying customer, you're in control. So if something goes on in the training that you don't appreciate, you can say, no, we're not going to do it that way. And if the trainer doesn't adjust their methods, you can find another trainer. Again, that control that's important. The connection is there when you cooperatively train your dog because you're there every day with that dog. That's again, that connection that builds the bond between handler and dog. That is what creates a successful team. That's there in cooperative training. So very beneficial, again, cooperative training. And there's a pro as far as perception. Although certification and registration are not legally required. Most trainers do some kind of certification. They do issue some kind of certification certifying that they have trained a service dog to whatever their certification level standard is. Certification is not required. Nobody can legally request to see your dog's certification. That is a violation of the ADA. However, you can achieve certifications, and sometimes they make things easier, unfortunately, because people don't understand the law. If you can whip out a certificate, there you have it. The cons to cooperative training. The biggest con is finding a trainer. Depending on where you live, how metropolitan or rural it is, there may not be a lot of trainers out there. You may have to be willing to drive up to 2 hours away to make it to training sessions. I strongly recommend positive reinforcement only training. It's also known in a lot of places as clicker training. But different trainers use different methodology and have different preferences, and different people have different preferences. So, one of the drawbacks of cooperatively training is that you have to find a trainer, and that's a lot of work. You have to do your homework. Don't be afraid to do your homework. Reach out, ask questions, message PTSDog page. Ask us if we know of any good trainers in your area, if that's the route you want to go. We'll do our best to help you. Another con is cost. It's less expensive than buying a program dog, but it is more expensive than self-training. So you have to recognize that you may have to pay per lesson, per length of the training, whatever it may be, but there is that cost. And availability. Again, rural or urban, you may have a lot of trouble finding trainers, and that can be a drawback. I've seen towns with 6 dog trainers in them, and cities with 2. It can be very hard to find a trainer, so that's a drawback of cooperative training. Finally, we're going to go to the program trained dogs. Now, first of all, let me say this up front. There is a place for program trained dogs. I personally don't feel that program trained PTSD service dogs are very effective, and we'll get into the reason of that. But I'm going to give you the pros of the program trained service dogs before we do. First of all is the convenience. You're not spending the time and energy it takes to train the dog. Somebody else does. If that's for you, there it is. That's going to cause a problem later because you don't understand the methodology, the thoughts behind the dog's training or the dog's behaviors, and that can create a lot of stress in the future between you and the dog if you don't understand. The second is the level of disability. There are people who simply are not physically able to train a service dog. Perfectly understandable. It's really hard for a person who's completely blind to train a seeing eye dog. There is a time and a place for a program dog. Certification. This is again same as with the cooperatively trained dogs. When you have a program, the dog gets certified. Again, not legally required by the ADA or the Department of Justice, not even recognized, but the certification is there. So that is a pro. Now we get to the cons. First of all, you have no control of how a program trained dog is trained. You don't know if it was trained using coercive methodology or reward-based methodology. You have no idea. I have a problem with that. I've heard stories of veterans who received a program trained dog where shock collars were used, and they had no idea how to use a shock collar, refused to use a shock collar, and instead of a fully trained service dog, they had an absolute disaster that destroyed their house, tore up. It was a disaster because they had no knowledge of how the dog was trained or how to work with the dog. You have no control when you use a program trained dog. The second drawback to a program trained dog is the bond. That bond is formed throughout the process of training the dog. Most programs bring the prospective service dog's handler to the program for 3 weeks. The first week, that person goes from dog to dog until they find a dog that seems to get along with the handler. Then they spend 2 weeks running through the basics, really, really fast basics of how to handle the dog. But neither the dog nor the handler have any experience working with each other. 2 weeks is not enough time to create a bond, and 2 weeks is not enough time to learn your dog. Skeeter still surprises me in the way he reacts to situations sometimes. We've been working together for 7 years. And it's only because I understand my dog, because I raised him, that I'm able to figure out what he's trying to tell me when he reacts certain ways to situations. That bond is absolutely vital to a PTSD service dog and their handler working as a successful team. It's very difficult to form with a program trained dog. In addition, the people who train the dog, no matter how hard they try, tend to form bonds with the dog. So the dog will bond to somebody it trained with. Now, a lot of the organizations try to cycle through trainers, each person only works with the dog for a week or whatever, but dogs are smart and they have good memories. And they will key into that one trainer who was their favorite, and they'll start to bond with that trainer. That's difficult. It confuses the dog. It's difficult for the handler, especially for a PTSD service dog. I don't feel it's the right way to go. Handling, again, you don't learn how to handle your dog in 2 weeks. It's just, I'm sorry, I don't care who you are or who runs you through the process. I don't see how you can learn how to work with and fully function as a team with your service dog in 2 weeks. If you can change my mind, by all means, give me a call, message me, take me to your program and show me how it works, because honestly, I've never seen it work. You get 2 weeks of kind of basic boot camp with your dog. You get turned out into the world. Depending on the service, maybe they give you, weekly calls and follow-ups and talk through issues. Maybe they don't. Maybe you only see them or check in with them once every 6 months. Maybe you never hear from them again. Personally, I wouldn't want to be handed a dog, said, here you go, and then not know what to do. And I've seen that happen, and it's sad. Program dogs have a very high washout rate. I don't think it's because the programs choose a bad dog or a bad handler. I don't think that at all. I think it's because of the way the program process works. Dogs bond to trainers accidentally. Dogs and handlers don't really mesh. Handlers don't have any real idea how to work with their dog. And so you really hear of a very high washout rate with programs. And that's sad. That's sad because, first of all, what happens to the dog? And second, what happens to the veteran? What do they do now? Especially since a lot of times it takes a long time to get into the program. Some of these places have 2 and 3 year waiting lists. Most cooperative training groups don't, because they're not caring for the dog 24/7. You are. And of course, there's no waiting list with self-training. You can go out and find a dog and start working on it yourself right away. Got to find the right dog, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but you can do that. Another con is governing bodies. There are certifying bodies that service dog training organizations belong to. There's no centralized American certification body. Don, I will get to that question here in just a minute. That's a great question. However, there are great standards in place in the dog training community in America. Most of these certifying bodies are not American organizations. For example, it's Assistance Dogs International or the International Association of Assistance Dog Providers. Neither one of those are United States companies or corporations. Both are foreign corporations, for-profit corporations. I have a problem with people's policy requiring, and I'm going to call out the VA here because the VA specifically wants their dogs to be certified by ADI. What is an international for-profit corporation doing with their hands in American policy for American veterans? The American Kennel Club standards are more than acceptable. They're canine good citizen, canine urban good citizen, and then you can go on to achieve even higher standards with the American Kennel Club, which is part of America. Why is it that we're using a foreign certifying body? You can get certificates from American companies. Not only that, but a lot of these foreign governing bodies they hold the ownership of the service dog over the disabled person's head. Think about that. They have certain requirements, like the dog always has to wear the vest they provide, or always has to wear their patch, or the dog always has to do X, Y, and Z. And if the dog doesn't, they hold the threat of removing the dog from the disabled person's ownership over their heads. It's part of their contract. So it's 99 degrees out. It's too hot for Fluffy to wear the vest that they gave me, but I've got to go do something. But if somebody from the organization sees that I don't have the vest on Fluffy, they're going to take the dog away. That begs the question, what's their purpose? Is their purpose to assist disabled people to live more independent lives, or to make themselves look good and make money? You be the judge. And of course, the bottom line with program trained dogs, I've seen prices quoted for program trained dogs everywhere from $10,000 to $60,000, with an average being $35,000. Now, a lot of these are nonprofits that do fundraising in order to provide service dogs to veterans free of charge. That's wonderful, but somebody pays $35,000 per dog. That's ridiculously expensive. Ridiculously expensive. They're even charging that for dogs that they rescue from a pound and rehabilitate to train as service dogs. They're still getting $35,000 or $40,000 for them. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, there is a place for program trained dogs. Absolutely. There absolutely is a place for program trained dogs. For a PTSD service dog, unless you're severely physically limited, I don't see a place for it. There are easier ways and less expensive ways to do it. So I wanted to start off with that, get us started. I will be posting that. That's part of the book. That's an excerpt from PTSDog. I will be posting it in the files section of the PTSDog group after we're done with our Q&A. And with that, we are going to get started with the Q&A. We're going to start with Don. Don, please, I hope I don't mispronounce this. Kohler's question? Kohler? We're going to start with Don's question, which is, if you're looking for a puppy to raise and then train to be your PTS dog, what characteristics should you look for? That is a great question. I used to breed Alaskan Malamutes. I bred Skeeter. And my answer used to be, well, I look for a dog that I'd want to replace Skeeter. So I had to break that down and really think about that and before I could come up with the real answer. And Smitty, I need you to Google the Volhard puppy aptitude test, please, and put the link up in the comments. One of the great tools you can use is to do the Volhard puppy aptitude test with the dog. And what I was doing unknowingly was basically putting the puppies that I would evaluate as donations to veterans to train as service dogs using a common sense version of the Volhard puppy aptitude test. Basically, you want to look for a puppy that is calm, pays attention and focuses on people, is more people oriented than oriented on the craziness of a litter of puppies around him. But then when you're one-on-one with the puppy, doesn't show any fear, shows curiosity but not craziness. You don't want that dog that's bouncing off the walls. You want a dog that's very calm and focused. And for me personally, when I'm looking for a dog for me to train, you want to look for a direct connection. That connection is very important. Nicholas, your question is next. That connection is very important. And that is not a measurable, I don't know how to quantify it. You know when you make a connection with a puppy. And there's no better way to describe it. You know when you know, at least for me. So what do you look for in a service dog, potential service dog? Calm, relaxed, focused, smart. You want to pick the puppy that solves problems, not the puppy who charges at the fence and just bangs its head against it over and over. You want to pick the puppy who sees there's a gap wide enough for it to get through on the left side, goes around all its brothers and sisters, and sneaks out. You want the puppy that's smart. And you want a puppy that's able to focus. And you can see that by the time the puppy is 2 months old, whether or not a puppy has good focus. That's real easy. It's one of the first things you can pick up on a puppy. And in my experience, a direct connection with intelligence. The puppy's able to stay focused and stay, it wants something and it works out how to get it. That's the puppy you want to train. That's the smart puppy who's going to pick up on everything you ask for it, and you're going to be able to train into performing tasks specifically. You also want to look for empathy. That's where that connection comes from. For PTSD, the dog's empathy is one of the most important factors. The dog needs to be able to pick up on what's going on with you in order to react so that it can, and this goes directly to Nicholas Ryan's question, the dog wants to be able to pick up what's going on with you so that it can react and respond to what's stressing you in order to head it off before it becomes a trigger. And this goes back into, thank you, Smitty. This goes back into a little bit more about PTSD rather than dogs. I choose to separate the things going on around me into stressors and triggers. The goal of using a PTSD service dog is to refrain from being triggered. In order to refrain from being triggered, you have to figure out what stressors are, what the things are that start you ramping up to that point where if it gets any worse, you're gone. Because we all know once you pull a trigger, there's a set result. Something downrange gets destroyed. So you never want to pull that trigger. You want to try to avoid pulling that trigger. So what a PTSD service dog does is performs physical tasks that interrupt those stressors in order to prevent them from becoming triggers. And together, working with your PTSD service dog, you learn to be able to move throughout the day, throughout given situations, throughout locations, where the dog will perceive whatever is stressing you, warn you that you're being stressed, and either afford you an opportunity to calm down or redirect you away from what's stressing you. And that all depends on what tasks you train the dog to do. I'll describe what I've trained Skeeter to do. For example, when one of his tasks is to create a buffer between me and people around me. Skeeter is a 100-pound dog. A lot of people mistakenly think he's a wolf. A lot of people are very scared of him just because of his size. They don't know he's a big teddy bear, but it is what it is. I trained Skeeter to create a physical buffer around me, either standing in front of me at a 90-degree angle, blocking, or sitting beside me, facing my rear, watching my six, or he'll stand behind me, say if I'm waiting in a line, so that people can't approach me directly. They have to get around my dog. That removes the stressor of people invading my space. That allows me to go into crowded areas because people won't approach me. So people aren't invading my space. I'm not getting stressed. I'm not going to go off and fly into a rage or a panic attack. The next thing he does, if somebody decides that they're going to invade my space anyway, is sit on my foot. This provides grounding. When a 100-pound dog sits on your foot, you automatically drop your hand and pet him. You don't have a choice. There's 100 pounds sitting on your foot. What do? Drop my hand and pet him. That is medically proven to release endorphin, reduce dopamine levels in the brain, and to calm you. So when he does that, my response to his alert of sitting on my foot is to start petting him, knowing that he's saying, okay, they're getting too close. I'm warning you. So my response as a responsible handler is, okay, I'll pet you and calm down and find out what's going on and work through it. If the stressor continues and gets worse, he will start pushing me away from that person. I've trained him to do that. He will start pushing me away. And usually I look at the person and say, oh, he's got to go. I use the dog as an excuse. Oh, he has potty. I got to go. And we're out of there. In an absolute extreme case, and this has only happened twice, because he's 100 pounds, he's reared up on his rear feet, put his hands directly on my shoulders, knocked me flat on my back, and laid on me, providing deep pressure therapy, also a medically proven treatment, until I'm calm enough to be able to get up and leave the situation. That's what works for me. That's another thing that I need to add to the pros and cons lists. Program dogs are trained a set series of tasks that may have absolutely nothing to do with what you need your dog to do. And they don't know what you need your dog to do. You fill out a questionnaire, you say, I have PTSD, this, I have this and this and this. And so they pick from this list of 30 tasks they have and say, well, that'll work. And they have no idea what'll work because they don't know you. They don't know your dog. They don't know if the dog will be able to perform those tasks. They don't know, they don't know the signals. They don't know what it is that happens to you that the dog should pick up on in order to respond to head off a PTSD episode. That can only be learned together between you and the dog. Again, another argument for cooperative or self-training. So I hope that answers the question, Nicholas. And I'm going to tell you, the other thing is, when you start working with the service dog, Nicholas, you're a veteran. I'm certain you have taken the zombie cocktail that the VA loves to give us. I went from, and I said this at the beginning, I went from 35 pills a day of either 8 or 11 different medications to 2 medications, 5 pills a day. Through the use of my service dog. I don't need all those medications anymore because things don't get to the level where I need the drugs to take that out of my brain. So I'm not a zombie. And that's another conversation for another day. But I think one of the reasons that the VA is so opposed to service dogs as treatment for PTSD for veterans is because it de-zombifies us. And they don't want us not to be zombies, because if we're not zombies, we can stand up for ourselves at the VA. They hate that. And I know some of you know what I'm talking about. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Oneida Wagner, Oneida, I'm not sure how to pronounce your first name, says, I need help to help my husband and myself understand the difference between a pet and a service dog. I don't think he gets the intensity of PTSD symptoms. I don't know how to explain to him. Also, does the source of the PTSD, battle versus sexual assault, affect the training? Well, that's a couple of good questions. First of all, the difference between a pet or an emotional support animal and a service dog is very clear and is legally defined. A service dog is a dog that is specifically trained to perform tasks for a disabled person in order to alleviate symptoms of their disability. Now, every single person who suffers from PTSD is different. So the symptoms of their PTSD are different. For example, I would have rage fits for no reason. That doesn't happen anymore. Skeeter performs tasks in order to keep me from getting to the point where I have rage fits. That's a symptom of my PTSD. I have panic attacks. Skeeter performs tasks in order to keep me from getting to the point where I have a panic attack. That's one of my symptoms of PTSD. And through our time together, working together, I've trained him what he needs to do in order to get me away from that point where I'm going to have a panic attack. Service dogs are very highly trained. Now, a lot of these organizations have these long lists of rules that a service dog has to do this, 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 and this. Smitty, please drop the link to the ADA Q&A into the chat. The fact of the matter is, what the law says is a service dog must perform tasks in order to alleviate symptoms of the disabled person's disability. Service dog must be under the handler's control at all times, and the service dog must be housebroken. Service dog doesn't have to be able to go over there, drop the leash, walk 30 feet away, and stay there. Law says nothing about that. It's not a requirement of the law. The service dog does not have to wear a vest. It's not a requirement of the law. Okay, service dog has to be able to perform a task for the handler to alleviate symptoms of their disability, be under the handler's control at all times, and be housebroken. That's what the law requires. And I actually wrote something down about this. There is no set standard in the service dog community, and I understand why there's no set standard in the service dog community. Because every single person that handles a service dog is different, has different needs, different requirements, and will interact with their individual dog differently. What works for an alert for my dog with me, somebody else may have no clue what he's doing. But when he sits on my foot, I know he's saying to me, hey, calm down, you're starting to spin up. So if I'm hanging out with another vet, he goes over and sits on their foot, I say, you're stressing out, aren't you? Yeah, why? Skeeter's sitting on your foot. They have no clue. Every individual's different. Every individual's training needs are different. Everybody's level of experience is different. And it doesn't matter the source from PTSD. I want to get this out here right now. This page, this book, me, my organization, we do not believe that only combat vets get PTSD. That is not true. Human beings get PTSD. And it's not only combat that causes it. You can get PTSD from a drastic car accident. I will stand behind the government's and medical community's definition of PTSD. If you want to come to my page and argue that only combat vets get PTSD, find another page to go to. I'll tell you that right now. Anybody can get PTSD. Anybody who can get PTSD can try to use a PTSD service dog to assist in their recovery. Plain and simple. That's what I believe. That's what I'm putting in my book. That's what I tell people. And it doesn't affect the training. What affects the training is what your symptoms are. That's going to affect what you train your dog to do. Because if you don't have panic attacks, why would you train your dog to respond to panic attacks? That doesn't make a lot of sense. If what you have are rage attacks, then you should train your dog to respond to you starting to get spun up and get angry to prevent rage attacks. Why would you train the dog to stop panic attacks when that's not one of your symptoms? The individuality of each person has as much importance and as much to do with what you train your PTSD service dog to do as the individuality of the dog. The size of your dog may affect the way you train. The breed of the dog may affect the way you train. Alaskan Malamutes like Skeeter are incredibly stubborn. The trick to teaching an Alaskan Malamute to do what you ask it to is that you have to figure out how to convince him it's his idea. That took me over a year with Skeeter. I did it. Kimberly Williamson, I plan on getting a shelter dog. Keep getting told to stay away from pit staffy rotty looking dogs because they're too scary and it attract too much attention. Have you seen any BSL? I'm not sure what BSL means, or rules against these bully breeds of service dogs. No, Kimberly, the ADA is very clear. There are no breeding restrictions, zero, none. No breed restrictions for service dogs. The ADA does not say you can only have such breeds. In fact, if you have a pit bull service dog, some of the best service dogs I've seen out there are pit bulls. In fact, check out Roxy the PTSD service dog, the pit bull PTSD service dogs page. Roxy's amazing. Um, some of the best service dogs I've seen out there are pit bulls. There is no breed restriction. You might want to choose a scary looking dog because people approaching you is part of what sets you off. I handle a 100-pound wolf. He's not a wolf, he's an Alaskan Malamute. But 9 times out of 10, if they're not calling him a husky, people are calling him a wolf. And they're scared to approach him because he weighs 100 pounds and looks scary. Unfortunately, the curiosity factor with Skeeter is greater than the fear factor. But no, there are no rules against bully breeds. Now, I will caution you with a shelter dog. I'm all for rescue. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely support rescue. I support 100% people who rescue dogs and are able to train them to be service dogs. More power to you. I think it's fantastic. The problem you get with a shelter dog is you don't know what happened in its past. So you may have what you consider a bomb-proof dog who can go anywhere with you, and it sees one person wearing a certain kind of hat, and it loses it because that was the person who abused it before it was rescued at the shelter. That's the one drawback to shelter dogs is unless they're very young puppies, you don't know what their past was. So that's something I want to caution you about. I also wouldn't start training a dog much older than 2. Because dogs have limited lifespans, and by the time they're 2, they're most all breeds are fully mature, with a few of the giant breeds not really maturing until they're about 3. So they're adults, and whatever's happened in their past has formed their personalities. So I'm not saying don't go rescue dog. Absolutely, if you feel that you can go that route, do it. But I'm saying you got to think about these things because you want a dog that's going to be as calm and non-reactive to the world around it, and as focused on you as possible. Not all dogs are not robots. Dogs are not perfect. Dogs do have bad days just the way we do. So I'm not saying, you want your dog to be a robot. What I am saying, though, is you want your dog to be able to be very focused and to be able to perform its tasks. And if you have whatever went on in that dog's past, just like what went on in your past affects how you perceive the day to day, you know what happened in your past. So this is going to happen. If this happens, this is how I respond, and this is where it could lead. But you don't know that with the dog. But no, there are no breed restrictions. There's no breed restriction. You can have any breed of dog as a service dog. If you want to train a Chihuahua to be your PTSD service dog, have fun. You want to train a Tibetan Mastiff to be your service dog, you can do that. There is no breed restriction. Let's see. Okay, Don. Don asks a good question, another good question. Don Kaler, after training the basics, what do you recommend be the first task you train your dog to do between grounding and buffering, etc.? Don, that's part of why cooperative or self-training is so important. You and your dog, as you grow together over the first 18 months to 2 years of the dog's life, you are going to start to pick up on that dog's responses to you, to your stressors and your triggers. And that connection, that bond, is what is so vital for a PTSD service dog to be part of an effective team with their handler. Because that bond is, the dog knows, mom's pulse is starting to increase. She's starting to get stressed. Her voice is raised a little bit. I'd better go over there and see what's wrong. And see that natural response when the dog comes over and to see what's wrong is when you then shape that response through positive reinforcement training and teach the dog to sit on your foot. So the dog picks up that you're starting to stress. You teach the dog when it picks up that you're starting to stress to come over and sit on your foot. Bam, task trained. If that's the task you want to train to do. But my point here is that this task first is not the way to do it. The teamwork you begin to develop, the mutual understanding you begin to develop with your dog is what you build on to begin to create tasks that the dog then performs for you. The cool thing about the way that Skeeter and I work, and pretty much every successful PTSD service dog team I've seen works, is that I don't command Skeeter to come ground me. I don't have to. I taught him how to do it and when to do it, and he does it before I realize I'm starting to spin up. He's preemptive. That's the trick. That's where the bond is important. He's preemptive to my moods. He picks it up 15, 20 seconds before I realize that things are going south. He gets in there and preempts things before they get to a point where they're going to get worse. That's what I'm talking about with the bond and building a team. That is absolutely essential for a team to work. And if you see Skeet and I out there together, you'll understand what I mean. We are a team. For the most part, I don't tell Skeeter what to do except which direction I'm heading. And for the most part, he doesn't tell me what to do unless he has to go potty or I'm starting to exhibit symptoms of my PTSD. And I've learned, because of the bond we've created, that when he tells me what to do because I'm starting to exhibit symptoms of my PTSD, I better listen or things are going to get really bad. And that ends up with, him lying on top of me, providing deep pressure therapy until I'm calm enough to remove myself from the situation. That's a lose on my part when it gets to that point. It's a win on Skeeter's part because he did his job and kept me from flattening some knucklehead who needed to be flattened. So I can't tell you do this, train this task or train that task. You have to evaluate in your self-evaluation while you're working through what it is that creates these issues and how your dog responds to it. You have to evaluate how you're going to train those responses and when. I do want to say, if you start with a puppy, I really strongly recommend that for at least the dog's first 18 months of life, you just teach it how to be a dog. You don't start task training it. If you're going to do any mobility with it, any weight bearing mobility, you can't start training until the dog's growth plates have closed. Most large breed dogs cannot bear any weight until they're 2 years old or older. And if you're really a considerate owner, you're going to take them to the vet and get x-rays to see if their growth plates are closed and ask the vet to clear them for mobility work. I really don't recommend any kind of task training until after 18 months because you got to go through puppyhood. And then between about, depending on the breed, 7 and 12 months, you got to go through puberty and the teenage years up until they're about 18 months. So just because of their development and their hormonal development and everything, dogs have a tendency up until they're around 18 months old not to start settling down into who they are and what they're going to be for the rest of their lives. If you spend your training time fighting all those teenage urges and all those puppy urges, you're going to have to retrain everything all over again once the dog gets through those periods. Do the basic puppy stuff. Go do a canine good citizenship class or a puppy good citizenship class. Understand that between 6 months and a year old, the dog's going to forget everything it learned because they're going through puberty and their teenage years, their rebellious teenage years. Then you're going to have to regain all that stuff between 1 year and 18 months old. Once that's all there, then you can start focusing on tasks. But also understand that your dog's going to be responding to you naturally during that entire period of time. So you're going to mark those and you can start rewarding the dog for responding, but you don't want to shape it into an actual task until you know it's something that the dog's going to be able to repeat and eventually that the dog's going to be able to perform as is needed on its own. And why do I say the dog has to perform its tasks on its own? I don't know about you, but if I'm in the middle of a panic attack or a rage attack, I am not capable of saying, "Oh, Skeeter, I'm panicking. Come over here and give me deep pressure therapy." It's too late. I've already freaked out. That's another drawback of program trained dogs. The dog's not going to know when it needs to come perform its task if it's trained to perform its task when it's told and only when it's told. You've got to form that bond with your dog so that your dog knows and understands this is what's going on with you. Oh, this is when I need to intervene. Dog intervenes and gets you away from that precipice before things turn from a stressor into a trigger. Let's see here. Breed-specific legislation. Even in towns where there is breed-specific legislation, they cannot affect a service dog. The ADA overrides breed-specific legislation. If it is a service dog that fits the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act, they cannot ban it from a town, period. Oneida, no, I don't think so. Oneida asks if interaction with other members of the home would be different with a service dog. Is it a bad idea to have other dogs in the home? Absolutely not. As long as the service dog understands that it has a job and its job is you. I mean, there's 2 dogs here in my house, my service dog and the roommate service dog. And basically they ignore each other. Roommate's dog works for him, my dog works for me. It shouldn't be a problem. Shouldn't be a problem. Let's see. Ashley Johnson, what should you know as far as a service dog living with a small child? Um, hmm. Same as with any dog living with a small child. You've got to teach the dog or teach the dog to be gentle with the child, and you have to teach the child to be gentle with the dog. You know, those rules aren't different with children in the home with a service dog. In fact, I think it'd be pretty good to have a small child in the home while you're working with and training a service dog, because it helps the service dog learn to not be distracted by things like small children around. But it's learning for both the child and the dog. But I don't think there's anything special you have to do. Not in my experience. You just teach your child not to pick on the dog, not to interfere with the dog. And usually I do have one of my Malamute service dogs with a service member in Colorado, and they have 2 small children, one of whom has sensory issues. And when daddy's not home for the service dog to help daddy, he helps this little girl when she's overwhelmed with her sensory issues. He'll go over and provide deep pressure therapy for her so she can calm down. It's something, and I think this is almost universal with a PTSD service dog. Something I've noticed is that PTSD service dogs, because of their empathetic nature, have a tendency to try and help anybody around them who they pick up on is having symptoms, having issues. I've had Skeeter leave my side to go talk to a veteran who was in the desperate need of somebody to just help him out because he was having a really bad day. And I was mortified. I was like, oh my God, Skeeter, no. And he's like, no, thank you. I needed that today. Thank you very much for letting him come over to me. Skeeter went over and just let him pat on him and love on him for about 5 minutes. The gentleman was able to calm down and continue on his way. Skeeter came back and gave me a look like, sorry, Dad, my people called. I had to go. Some people would say, oh, that dog's disobedient. You got to wash him. Some people aren't part of the veterans community and don't understand that we take care of one another. And if that means I'm going to loan you my dog for 5 minutes so you can have a better day, didn't hurt me any. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know, Stacy Hartcup, whoever told you that service dogs aren't for families that have children under 9, that's baloney. I don't know who told your husband that, but that's ridiculous. Service dogs are for people with disabilities who need some assistance and that the dog is able to provide. It has nothing to do with the children in the house or anything like that. Where to start looking for information regarding how to train dogs? Good question, Dave. Smitty, I need you to post a link from Amazon. The name of the book is Don't Shoot the Dog. A great place to start, Dave, is a book called Don't Shoot the Dog. Of course, I can't remember the name of the author because, yeah. But it is the basis upon which positive reinforcement training, also known as clicker training, was built. And it gives you a very good idea, a very good mindset on how to train a dog using positive reinforcement. Another route to go is to find a local trainer who's willing to work with you to train your dog together. There are millions of videos about dog training on YouTube. Be very careful what you look for and do your research. There are books. There are 2 books specifically about training service dogs called The Next Step 1 and The Next Step 2. Those are also available on Amazon. I believe that's their name. I'll have to look for that, and I'll try to drop those links into the comments later on. Uh, there are there are millions of resources. There are as many ways to train a service dog as there are people out there who train dogs, as there are handlers out there, and as there are dogs out there. One of the important things that somebody said to me, and I wish I remember who said it was somebody on the page, was train the dog in front of you. You're never going to know what you need to do until you're working with the dog right in front of you. You can have all the plans in the world, and your puppy might look at you and go, I'm not going to do that. And so you've got to figure out what your dog's motivation is in order to get it to perform the tasks you need it to perform. That's where things get frustrating, and where working cooperatively with a trainer can be of a great assistance. Kimberly Williamson, you're absolutely right. Good service dogs can be ruined by busy families and kids because the parents don't teach the kids to leave the dog be. You're absolutely right. Ideally, the dog is treated as a member of the family with the same amount of respect that the kids are supposed to treat each other. Maybe even a little more so, treating the dog with as much respect as the parents are. That doesn't always happen. But that's the responsibility of the handler, not the children. That's the responsibility of the parents. That's not the dog's fault. That's the handler's fault. So you're right. That can happen. I would take a good look at the handler in that and fault the handler. It is unfortunate, but it can happen. But, if the dog's already learned, I feel that you can probably reclaim that dog's abilities. It just takes a little training. DV6, yeah, give me a call after I'm done, and we'll chat. All right, there's only 2 minutes left. Okay, I'm not going to wrap up because DV6 has a really good point. This is good, and so I'm going to address this because this is important. How do you deal with it when a business refuses to let you in with your service dog? This is something that comes up on my page a lot. It is something that we deal with as handlers, unfortunately, far more often than we should. Smitty, drop that link to the Q&A again, please. The ADA Q&A. Businesses are only allowed to ask you 2 questions when it is not obvious that the dog is a working dog or what tasks it performs. If you're blind, you come in with glasses on and a seeing eye dog, the business by law cannot even ask you if it's a service dog. It's obvious. It's right there in front of them. PTSD service dog, a lot of us use vests. So if the dog is vested and is behaving, the business can't ask you a question. If they have a policy of ask everybody, they're breaking the law. There are times when I don't vest Skeeter because it's just too hot. He's a black dog in a black vest, and he's a snow dog, and if it's just too hot, I'm not going to punish him that way. I'm not going to put a vest on him. So in that case, it's not obvious that he's a service dog or what he's doing. I expect to be challenged. The correct way for a business to challenge you is to ask, 1, is that a service dog trained to perform tasks to alleviate a disability? The answer is yes. The only other legal question they can ask is, what tasks is it trained to perform? That's it. If they ask you, why do you need it? They're asking you what your disability is. That's a violation of the HIPAA law. It's against federal law. If they ask you straight out, what are your disabilities? That's a violation of HIPAA. If they say, well, you don't look like you're disabled, my response usually is, you don't either, but you must be really dumb to have just said that. It doesn't win me a lot of fans. So what do you do? What do you do when they refuse to allow you to come in because they don't understand the law? The first thing you can do is breathe, be patient, and calmly explain the law. I keep the link to the ADA's frequently asked questions Whenever I open the browser on my cell phone, it pops up. So I can just say, look, here's the Americans with Disabilities Act website. Why don't you read for yourself what the law is? If they refuse, if they still refuse, if they if they still refuse to listen to the law, if they still refuse to learn about the facts, your best bet is to turn around and walk away. That is the safest thing to do. We all know that we're veterans, we have PTSD, and things can get ugly when triggers are pulled. So you have to ask yourself a question at that moment in time, is it worth handcuffs? Or is it more worth walking away, writing down the person's name, the name of the business, phone number, address, contact information, going home, finding out if your state has a disability rights office, and if it doesn't, giving the Department of Justice a call, the U.S. Department of Justice. Smitty, I need that link too, if you can drop it in. Giving the Department of Justice a call and filing a formal complaint against this business for refusing you service because you use a service dog. Because at that point, that business is violating the ADA. Usually, the business gets a nasty letter from the Department of Justice, and all of a sudden you get a phone call or a formal letter or even an email apologizing and inviting you to come back to their business anytime. If they refuse, let the Department of Justice handle it. I'll give you a case in point. I tried to rent a hotel room, and although the hotel allowed dogs and was dog friendly, the owner told me that I couldn't allow my service dog to be on the bed. Well, I told him, you can't tell me how to use my service dog. One of Skeeter's tasks is he interrupts nightmares by waking me up, by laying on me. Because I lash out in my nightmares. I swing my hands, swing my fists. Skeeter comes and lays on me and wakes me up, so I don't do that. I said, you can't tell me how to use my service dog. That's like you telling me I can only park my wheelchair on the left side of the room. You can't do that. He said, well, that's my rules. You can't have their dog on the bed. I said, well, cancel my reservation and I'll file a complaint with the state right now. And I did. I got a call from the guy the next morning. Well, I talked to my lawyer and you were right. I can't tell you how to use your service dog. So I guess you can have the room. I said, I already canceled my reservation and filed a complaint with the state. You have a nice day. Why did I file a complaint with the state? Not because I wanted money or anything like that, because I didn't want to have something like this happen to the next veteran who tried to rent a room at this guy's hotel. There are ignorant people out there who don't understand that disabled people who use service dogs have rights and that they cannot tell them what they can or cannot do with their service dogs. The ADA is pretty clear. The only place you can't take your service dog in a public location is where things like food is being processed, or into sterile environments like an isolation room at a hospital or in a excuse me, a operation theater. That's it. Unless the dog fundamentally alters the way that the business operates, they cannot prevent you from taking the dog there. But the best way to handle it, if they absolutely refuse to listen, is to walk away and file a complaint with the Department of Justice. And if you hang on just a second, I'm not going to be able to see you, but I know you can see me. The Department of Justice Disability Rights section. Of course, the link's not there. There's a link on the file called Service Dog Legal Resources in the PTSDog group. We'll drop the link here into the comments in the chat. Yeah, don't freak out. Don't go full DV. That'll get you put in cuffs. Walk away. You're trying to go to a restaurant, they refuse to let your dog in. Go to a different restaurant, file a complaint. Let the legal system handle it. It's really that simple. It's not, the whole reason why there's a disability rights section of the Department of Justice is to deal with exactly things like that. The next thing you can do once the complaint is filed is call out a fire mission. Tell all your buddies who use service dogs, hey, you should go to this restaurant and piss them off. I'm not saying to go be ugly. I'm saying let's see if this is a pattern. Get them to keep refusing people. The DOJ is going to respond more if 6 people file complaints that this restaurant's not allowing them in or this hotel. Another thing you can do is this. Now that I have a mod squad on my page, I have somebody watching the page almost 24 hours a day. We just recently had a circumstance arise where a veteran was trying to check into a hotel with a service dog and was refused service. He contacted the page. We provided him real time with all the links to all the resources he needed to share with the hotel manager, including the contact to the corporate office of the hotel. Not only that, but we actually went ahead and found a hotel nearby, talked to the manager, explained the situation, had a room lined up for him with a discount at the other hotel. Meantime, his wife had called the local police, and they came and explained the law to the hotel and told them what you're doing is a violation of his rights. The manager did relent. However, the visit was very unpleasant because the hotel employees persisted in discriminating against him, treating him like some kind of an alien because he used a service dog. They watched him suspiciously everywhere he went, like a dog screws up 1 inch, he's out of here kind of thing, which is wrong. You wouldn't do that to somebody with a wheelchair. What are we doing about it? Well, I'm working on a letter to corporate concerning the event, and I'm going to offer that we could do a corporate training session. We can get together with their franchises and make sure that they're fully educated and understand the law so that they're not abusing the rights of disabled people who come with service dogs to their facilities in the future. The solution to these issues is education. It really is. Education is the only way we're going to fix the problems that we have with access and service dogs. Mikey Butler, no, they cannot stop you from having their service dog in the house. Now, housing is not covered by the ADA. Housing is covered by the Fair Housing Act and HUD. The only time somebody who rents a house can keep you from bringing a service dog into their home is if they rent less than 5 properties and do not use a housing, like a rental management agency. If they rent 5 or more properties or use a rental management agency, they cannot deny you access because of your service dog. They can request a letter from your doctor, and this is per the Fair Housing Act, saying that you are disabled and that a service dog is a part of your treatment program. That's it. They can't ask you what your disability is. They can't say, well, why do you need a service dog? None of that. Check out FHA.gov to read those. Hey, Doc, to read those regulations. The links are on the documents file in the PTSDog group. I'm about to wrap up, but I have a major announcement, so thank you to all of you who have stuck around. The book is that close to being ready to submit to an editor and then be published. In order to get that done, it's going to cost me about $5,000 to pay for editing and the first run of books. So graciously, Dysfunctional Veterans has teamed up with me to do a pre-sale order of PTSDog t-shirts. And let's see if I can pull up the design out of my email and share with you guys. We have 2 designs. One is just simply black and white. One is white, red and blue, And I don't know if this is going to show the designs here. Oh, chat doesn't work that way. Anyway, starting the 15th of December, we are going to do a pre-sale of PTSDog t-shirts. As long as we reach a certain number of sales, they will be printed. If they do not reach the required number in order for a run to be printed, you will get all your money back. So you don't lose anything if the shirts aren't printed. The shirts say they have the PTSDog logo right here on the front, and on the back it says it's a dog, not a unicorn. Because that's something that everybody seems to like on the page. So look for that. It'll be on mydvstore.com. Thank you very much to the Dysfunctional Veterans Organization for working with me to raise the funds in order to do this. Like I said, I'll also be pairing that with a GoFundMe specifically for editing and publishing. I would love to see hard copies of PTSDog being distributed in the first quarter of next year. But it's going to cost to do that. So I'm asking for your help. You get a great t-shirt out of it. And more importantly, we start the education that is needed to help defray a lot of the misunderstandings and misconceptions about PTSD service dogs specifically, but service dogs as well in general that are out there. Thank you very much, everybody who was on today. I hope I was able to get to most of your questions, if not all of them. If there are any specifically I missed, I do have my mod squad going through the comments. And like I said, I will try to remember to drop the links to those two books. I believe they're called The Next Step 1 and The Next Step 2. They are specifically written about training service dogs. I'll try to drop those in there. As always, if you have any questions about PTSD service dogs, just about service dogs, you have any, you're having issues, reach out to the page. Join the PTSDog group. It's open to anybody. There's a lot of really good conversation and education going on in there and a lot of support. And last but not least, I have 5 moderator team. I am looking to hire some more as things get busier and we grow. I'm going to need some more mods. If you're interested in working with the PTSDog team to help educate people about the truth about PTSD service dogs, please message the page. Get with me, and either Smitty or myself will get back to you. Smitty's my lead mod, and we will talk to you and go through the interviewing process and see if you're a good fit for the team. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate all of you who joined in, and I hope this was informative. See you guys again soon.